Hello everybody, my name is Shriya Gautam and I am an independent research scholar from the University of Oxford. Today I'm going to talk to you about the temples of the Gurjara Pratiharas for travel, trade and pilgrimage. This is a Speaking Archaeologically project which was undertaken from the year 2016 onwards and right up until the pandemic hit us in December 2019. So before I proceed further, I would like you to know a little bit about Speaking Archaeologically. Speaking Archaeologically is an archaeological education group based in North India, which focuses on object analysis, documentation of neglected sites, and rescue archaeology. It was founded in 2015, and in the 6 years of its existence since then, it has produced and trained young archaeologists, conservators, and art historians who are actively taking the torch forward. Now, about this project, it started as an independent project with myself at the helm and later evolved into a Speaking Archaeologically project involving large-scale documentation and recording of the Gurjara Pratiharas temples. For the purpose of this, since 2016, we were documenting different sites all across the country. And here on the map, you can see some of the sites that we've covered for this purpose. The main aims of this project was to understand the temple architecture of the Gurjara Pratiharas and also understand the role of temples in the political context of the Gurjara Pratiharas. So what was the political motive behind building these temples? Of course, we also wanted to look into the religious implications and the iconographic implications of these sites, and we wanted to understand these temples with the help of oral traditions, myths, and modern perceptions. So before we go any further, I think it becomes imperative to address who the Gurjara Pratiharas were. The Gurjara Pratiharas are one of the first 4 patrilineal clans of an ethnic caste group that identifies itself with the Rajputs today. On the map here, you can see the extent of their empires. They virtually start as the small family at the border of modern-day Rajasthan and Gujarat in the west of India, and they slowly expand northwards and then eastwards. So they rise into power somewhere around the 7th and the 8th century CE and quickly assume the helm of major parts of North India by the 9th century. Now, one of the things that the Pratiharas did while expanding as a political and imperial power was they undertook massive construction of temples in almost every new area that they conquered. Principal in this temple building drive was the king Nagbhatta II, who was a Gurjara Pratihara king, and it is under him that temple architecture assumed monumental proportions, pun not intended. Their construction project became so widespread that when you study Indian temple architecture, you can almost isolate the phases of Gurjara Pratihara temples. And this becomes synchronous with their phases of dynastic progression. So here again, you see a table which talks about the phases of the Gurjara Pratihara expansion and also the temples that they built. The first or the initial phase of their expansion, when they were a localized power in Gujarat and Rajasthan and maybe bits and pieces of Haryana, takes place around 725 CE. And in this period, they're experimenting massively with temple architecture. They're coming up with new floor plans, new styles, and usually a combination of different kinds of architectural styles. In phase 2, which is the middle phase, also the phase of their ascendancy, they gradually develop onto a rectangular floor plan and show a preference for temples that are based on rectangular plans. They also start constructing a mandap or an antechamber to the temple. And the third and the last phase, of course, is from 825 to 900 CE. This is also synchronous with their phase of decline and eventual extension to the limit where the feudatories start declaring themselves independent. It is in this phase that they sort of continue with the rectangular floor plan of the middle phase, but then gradually go on to develop temples on a circular plan. So here we've talked about that, but studying the temples was not enough. While studying their temples, it became imperative that we also studied their contextual history. And while doing so, my group and I found that there were different underlying motives behind construction of temples by the Gurjara Pratihars. Now, obvious ones were the religious motives, but the not so obvious ones were political, economic, and social motives, all behind building a temple. So let's look into this implication, so to speak, because that's exactly what we are here for. That's exactly the purpose of this paper. So first off, the religious implications. Well, architecturally, the Pratihara temples represented a circuit of Shaiv, Shakt, and Vaishnav shrines, located in close proximity to each other, as well as temples of similar faiths in other parts of India. The first few temples that the Pratihar built combined a lot of faiths. They did not build temples randomly, or they did not seem to favor a particular deity. Rather, they were patronizing quite a lot of deities as they started building temples. It's very difficult to classify the temples of the Pratihars with respect to a singular deity. And even though most of their temples are Shaiv, that's only something that happens later on in the middle phase. The earlier phase exhibits temples of almost every deity and of almost every style. Slowly, these temples also start emerging into the first few centers of Hindu Tantricism. And one of the things that you realize while religiously studying these temples, that is, studying these temples with respect to their iconography and the kind of deities that they enshrine, is that they were built in accordance with the Samartha Brahmin traditions. Now here a small note about Samartha Brahmins. Samartha Brahmins were a caste of priests who were very upset with the ongoing problems between the Vedic and the Puranic Hinduism. Now Vedic Hinduism is the worship of natural phenomenon. So the earth element, the sky element, and different natural phenomena such as fire, air, water, so on and so forth. Whereas the Puranic Hinduism is more Greco-Roman in nature. It believes in a holy trinity of sort, and it was worshipping these composite deities that are a combination of Vedic, Parthian, Indo-Greek, and Scythian deities or Scythian people of worship. So all of this was undergoing a veritable tussle in the Indian subcontinent by the time that Gurjara Pratihars come into power. And consequently, their temple architecture tries to harmonize these two vying traditions within the Hindu mode of worship, which is the natural phenomenon or the Vedic Hinduism, and the Puranic composite phenomenon that emerged because of various people coming into the Indian subcontinent in the earlier part of ancient phase. So naturally, it can be deduced that these temples were built with the idea of appeasing people of all beliefs and with the idea to harmonize these vying religions. Central to this is the floor plan that they start adopting in the middle phase, which is the Panch Yatna floor plan. Now, Panch Yatna technically means 5 shrines arranged in quincunx pattern. And here on the left, you see a diagram where we have one deity in the middle and 4 deities surrounding him. This is known as the Panch Yatna Puja Mandal, which was actually prevalent as early as the 3rd century in Rajasthan. And it is this plan that they eventually incorporate when they start expanding northwards. Literally all of the temples that they build as they go northwards start assuming this Panch Yatna floor plan. This floor plan was then arranged into a mandal or a diagram, which you see on the left, far left that is. At the bottom, we have a partial floor plan of the Masroor set of temples, also Gurjara Pratihar, located in North India. And on the top, we have the Tantric mandal. So suddenly, the Panch Yatna floor plan or the Panch Yatna diagram starts encapsulating not just the Vedic deities and the Puranic deities arranged in a quincunx pattern, but also vying beliefs of Tantra or Tantric practices. And all of this gets harmonized into their temples as we see in the floor plan below. Now here's another diagram showing you what the Panch Yatna plan was supposed to look like. And on the left, we have a diagram of a Panch Yatna temple. So we we tried to show through a diagram what the Panchyatna floor plan would have looked like. Now, of course, this magnitude of temple building was not really as monumental in the Pratihara phase as it was in their subsequent feudatories. So the Chandels, for example, who are famous for building the Khajuraho temples, they took the Panchyatna floor plan to an almost different and altogether monumental proportion. The Pratihara temples were smaller, but they were certainly the prototype of what we see happening in Khajuraho almost a century later. In the religious sphere, therefore, these temples are enshrining complex multi-faith concepts, proving to be relevant places of pilgrimage for diverse people, for people of diverse faiths. So whether you are a Pashupat who believes in animal worship, or you are a Lingayat who believes in worship of fertility cult, which is what Hindu Tantra eventually becomes, or you are somebody who engages into the worship of natural phenomena or Puranic deities, suddenly the Gurjara Pratiharas temples are enshrining all these multi-faith concepts into one singular shrine, bringing an end, therefore, to what may be called vying religions for royal patronage. This brings us to a very important concept, which is the location of these temples. Where were these temples located? And how did the Pratiharas ensure that people of different faiths could access these temples easily? Now, interestingly, while we were mapping these temples, as we went from Rajasthan further northwards, we found that almost all these temples are located around trade routes. Trade routes which have now taken the name of national highways, significantly National Highway 1A and National Highway 91, but also areas or routes which even in the ancient times were trade routes of importance. They linked up to the Silk Road in the north and eventually connected the Indian subcontinent with the larger scheme of travelers. Of course, locating these temples along trade routes would ensure that people could visit them easily. These were popular routes. People were taking these routes anyway in order to travel, in order to go from one place to another. But it also served the dual purpose of using a temple as a caravanserai for traders. Many sources have talked about it significantly in the recent historiography of India. Peter Frankopan talks about it extensively in his book on Silk Roads, where he talks about how various religious shrines, not just the Pratiharas, but also shrines as early as from the 1st century CE, were built along trade routes to act as makeshift banks for travelers and traders. Significantly, the caravan of traders who were required to carry a lot of cash in order to carry out their transactions could deposit their money in a particular temple or in a particular shrine and then take what was a preliminary bill of exchange or the prototype of the modern day bills of exchange and then take it to the city where they wanted to go next, encash the money that they wanted to encash and carry out their trade without any hassle. So in this case, the temples served as modern day ATMs of sorts. And ethno-archaeological investigations that we carried out while conducting this project also showed the temples significantly continued to be used so even in later times. An interesting story here is that of the Kamakhya Devi temple, which is in Assam, and the same deity being worshipped thousands and thousands of miles away to the far northwest in the state of Himachal Pradesh, with no apparent land connections except for a past trade route. On investigating this family and talking to the seniors of this family, it was observed that one of their ancestors, who happened to be a trader, had gone to Kamakhya Devi and had gone to Assam to carry out trade and was able to borrow a significant sum of money, in lieu of which he became a lifelong patron of the deity and decided to build another temple of the same name in the Himalayan region. So stories like these then tell us that temples served as important arteries of trade. We have literary evidence for this from books as early as the Arthashastra, And until the Mughals came along and caravanserais make their appearance in the Indian subcontinent, the temples served as a place where you could rest at night, but also where you could withdraw money from. So, at Speaking Archaeologically, for this particular project, we studied all of these and then we compiled our reports into this beautiful book that you see on the left. We talked about the structure of these temples, the science of architecture, the religious philosophy with which these temples were built, the archaeology of these temples, as well as their iconography, their history, and we photographed and documented these sites, recording the more vulnerable ones, because significantly by now, not a lot of these shrines are in standing condition anymore. We made illustrations and plans, we digitized these sites to the best of our capability, and then as soon as we were hit by the pandemic, we decided to publish our finds in the Speaking Archaeologically Journal Volume 3, which came out in 2020 amidst the COVID-19 outbreak. So at the end of this, I would like to thank a huge cache of people, significantly my co-editor Divyansh Thakur, who was at the helm of the project with me throughout, our very, very talented chief illustrator Siddharth Iyer, whose diagrams you've seen in this particular slide, our cartography and temple plans expert Priyanshu Mehta, our principal photographer Manish Sharma, our proofreading team Diptarak Datta and Simran Saini, and also our site survey team spearheaded by Mayank Singh, who's also helping me record this video for you. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this project. Here is the selected bibliography for the same. And if there are any questions, I look forward to them. Thank you so much.